I am like, seriously, when my IT guy, because it's all remote because I'm here, he's like, Jen, your computer, you need to turn your computer off at night. I'm like, I turn it off every night. I was turning off the screen on my. I didn't know that thing was a computer in the box. I don't do IT.
Hello and welcome to Table for Five with no reservations. Take a seat at the table for a fresh, sweet, salty, tart, and pleasantly bitter conversation.
Thank you for taking the seat at the table. This is episode 3. This is how we do communication. Seated at the table tonight, we have Jamie.
Hello.
Rachel.
Hey, everyone.
Tabitha.
Hi.
Jen.
Hello.
And I'm Kim, and we're going to talk about how we do communication. Tabitha, would you like to start?
Yeah. So Nixon was one of the first signs leading towards his autism evaluation was mainly communication. So he was nonverbal. I always get timelines mixed up, but I would say 3.5 to 4 years old is when he started picking up verbal language. He had some words early on, and then those kind of came and went. He's always had sounds. He's always made noise. He's had verbal stems his whole life. So we didn't think too much about it because he was always making noise and we could always hear him pretty much. His language developed. It started with echolalia, which is basically when our kids repeat phrases, words from others. He a lot of times echoed my husband's language, and same from TV. Like he'd say the same thing over and over and over again from one show. So it started mainly with echolalia, and then he moved to scripting longer series from TV shows, which is where kids basically copy the tone, the voice, the everything from inflection from a television show and use it as communication. So you have to know the context of the show. And we've talked about this on our podcast before with scripting. So he moved to scripting, and then he started gaining more functional language. So knowing his name, you can ask him what he wants to eat. He can make choices, tell you what he doesn't like, that's for sure. Yeah. And that's accelerated. I would say he just turned 5. So over the last 6 months, I would say we've started to see a lot more language that's functional for him. He still can't answer questions about his day or tell you something that happened in detail that's in the past or coming in the future. But when we were sick the last time, he was able to tell us that he was sick, that he didn't feel good, that his belly hurt, which is a first for us. So it's definitely progressing a lot with him and language. One thing we learned with nonverbal language is you really have to be tuned into your kid. It's a guessing game all the time. You have to know their shifts in mood. You have to know their favorite snacks. You have to know, like you really just have to be really tuned into them. And then our daughter, Nora, she had language. She developed on time, and then she lost her language, all of it, and sounds at 18 months-ish. So she completely went silent. We didn't have any sounds, any language. It was really abrupt with her. And then she was silent for a while, and we started using sign with her. She's picked up some signs. She uses PECS, which she picked up really quickly, the PECS system, out of the house. She doesn't really care for it inside of the house. She's like, you know what I'm talking about, lady. I don't need those cards. Don't make me do that crap. We're not doing that.
My daughter was exactly the same.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. And she's excellent at nonverbal communication. So leading you to the exact cupboard where she wants the exact snack, which drawer she wants to open in the fridge, what shoes she wants to wear. Nixon was kind of just like, go with the flow. Like, I'm hungry or I want to drink. Here's the
Except
cup.
for his cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah. Before he was kind of just like, whatever you're going to give me is fine. She's like, if you hold up a cracker box, she doesn't want those crackers. She's smacking that thing out of your hand. She's like, no, thank you. That's not the right one. Try again. No, not happening. And then this week we started working with the AAC device, which is a communication device. There's lots of different apps that you can put on communication. And actually our episode that is dropping is AAC Awareness Month in October. So there's a bunch of apps that are discounted during that month. There's going to be a lot of posts and talks about AAC device. But for us, what happened basically is we went to this event with my brother for Arizona Autism Society. And I was talking to a gentleman there who like helps facilitate getting AAC devices for parents through insurance. And I was telling him the story of her using PECS and Sign. And he basically just handed me an AAC device to take home. He didn't
Which is
know me.
incredible. Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. He was like, here, just take this one. You can trial it. It has Touch Chat on it, is the app that we're using right now, or the program that we're using. And so her providers are helping us facilitate like how to model for her. They helped us learn how to do the buttons. She was on 4 buttons on one screen, and now we've put, I think it has 4x4. So we've narrowed the buttons because she picked it up so quickly, like using it. So I'm really excited about her using an AAC device. I keep saying that she has so much language trapped in there. She has tons of receptive language. She understands what you're saying to her. She wants to communicate more. And you just know that those words are trapped inside. And so when she first used her device, or like when we saw her using it, she just smiled from ear to ear and was just so happy.
It was like bigger
herself.
than that. She was glowing.
Yeah, she was just so excited that she was using her device. So we've been told by a lot of people that, and I don't know if this is like SLPs or speech language pathologists or where the information is coming from, that AAC devices can limit your verbal language, but
Not from speech therapists. I think
no, I mean, like in the
yeah.
past, from research of like the
Mhm.
progression of language and the progression of apps and what has happened, like where that idea has come from the past. I don't mean now, like they're on board with it now, but
Well, a lot of people still believe that though. A lot of
yes.
people still believe
Yes.
that because they think it will make almost like if you have a device that will speak for you, they're not going to try as hard to speak.
Yeah.
A lot of people
Yes.
still feel that way. But
And that's
it's
what I was trying to say. I didn't say that very well, but you know what I mean? Like from the history that there's this idea that speech devices don't help your verbal language, but now it's understood that it actually helps prompt you to speak because you're hearing the word over and over and over again as you're using the device. You're seeing a picture
Yep.
connected to it. You're seeing your parents model using it, and some words have come back over the past couple months. They're not all the time. She uses 2 words pretty much all the time, up and open. Those are her 2 communication words. She can say mom, she can say dad, go, she had for a while, and then we lost that for a bit. She'll gain one and then she'll lose one. She has a speech evaluation tomorrow. And I really wonder with her about apraxia because you can see her trying with her mouth so hard to formulate a word and thinking, like you can actually see her brain processing as her mouth is trying to form a word. It's a lot different than Nixon. Nixon's receptive language and his communication were kind of paired together. And the more he understood, the more it started to develop, and the more he started to gain it. With her, she understands a ton of language, but she doesn't have the ability to speak. So it's really kind of fascinating with the 2 of them. The differences. Communication is mind-blowing. It really
Yep,
is.
it
It's
is.
so mind-blowing. Yeah. So
and
that's
we're
kind
so
of,
excited. We're so excited for Nora
oh yes,
because I think this will open doors for her, you know.
yeah, and for us, just the frustration. I think once you gain more communication, the frustration goes down. Once you can
Mhm.
speak to each other, the frustration goes down.
Yes.
In any way, and not just verbal speaking, but communicate with each other. So we posted a video of her using her device on our page,
Everything.
Piece of Autism, if you want to go check it out.
Yep,
It's so
check it out.
amazing.
100
your heart.
times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched that video. I'm not exaggerating. Probably 300 times.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
It's watchable
Awesome.
300
Yeah.
times. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah, our little Nora B.
It's time for our Amazon must-have from the table break, and this week, awkwardly enough for me, is my own book, which is a parent-teacher back-and-forth communication journal. This journal is an aid to help parents and teachers communicate about a student who may not be able to communicate for themselves. We've always used communication journals with my son's teachers. They help us help him thrive at school. I wanted to make one that was a little more simplified and really quick and easy for the parent and teacher to fill out. In this journal, the parent fills out how the child's evening was, what their morning mood was, how much they ate for breakfast, and a note section where they can ask questions or give any concerns. On the other side, the teacher will fill out how the student's day went. They cover what they did well, what their mood was, anything they did, specials or therapy-wise, bathrooming information, how much they ate at school, and a note section for teachers to give any concerns, answer any questions, or just give an uplifting note about the child. The book comes in 2 different colors. Both will be linked below in the description of this episode. Make sure to use our affiliate links to help support the podcast. All right, let's get back to the table.
How about you, Jen? What does Kaya's communication look like?
Kaya's communications, our diagnosis, we were led that direction because we had no language. So she was 2.5. There was nothing. There was no babble. There were no sounds. There was just nothing. And she didn't really speak until she was 5. I mean, there was just nothing. She would say mama if you said mama, sometimes Elmo, but nothing was ever spontaneous. There was never any language. What's interesting, Tabitha, is her OT actually just said to me exactly what you had said. She said, I think it would even really help Kaya if you got her that device, because it would allow her to get out more on this, and then in turn her language would develop from it. And that now it's showing that the more people have access to these devices, the more it does help build their language.
Yeah.
So that's turning, the thoughts on that, which is good. Also, I bought her an Alexa for Christmas last year, and you have to be really clear when Rachel's heard her. It's the cutest thing when she talks to Alexa. And so that's helped her because she's had to speak clearer. We did sign early on, nothing extensive, just the basics that helped her to have a little bit of communication. She picked that up really quickly. Now, again, she couldn't articulate if something happened to her in a day. I would learn it through behaviors. It's like you have to figure it out and okay, what's going on kind of thing. She can answer questions. She'll ask them, but yeah, it's still very limited.
Her language progress? Like
So
when
we
she
got
did started speaking.
So we got really lucky. We had the best SLP, speech language pathologist. She was kind of the first therapist on this journey that wasn't trying to gouge me, that wasn't trying to bill me out for, just the typical here anyway, sort of way of taking advantage of the vulnerable parent, and she really was the first therapist that took a true interest in Kaya. She had said, I had her in all these different therapies, and Jackie had said to me, you really should focus on speech for her, because and she was always the first to say, it doesn't have to be verbal speech. That's not the only way to communicate. Not just, it's not the only way, but we have to give her an outlet to communicate. People cannot expect all of these things from her if she can't communicate. So we have to get her to that line of communication. And so I dropped all of the therapies. We went, 4 years, every Saturday, on off times, Wednesdays and Saturdays. And Jackie just became a part of her team. And I really, would she have gotten there? Probably at some point, but I think that having that specific person was life-changing. So communication, that was how we did it. But not that this book is going to make anyone's child speak, but what was instrumental in our therapy with her was the Hannon method. But there's 2 books on it. She's talking a lot right now. There's It Takes 2 to Talk. It's a groundbreaking therapy they do with children and parents. It teaches you how to speak to your children, not at your children, and not for your children. You really had to stop every single train of thought you had and think differently about that situation. So it was instrumental. So you can get it on Amazon. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And then there's a follow-up to that book.
How is Kaya's receptive language before she was speaking?
It was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
Did you find that they grew together, or did you always like one stronger than the other?
Yeah, I did find they grew together. But I also would find, and I don't know if you guys notice this with your kiddos, whenever we have these stretches of hard, there always seems to be some big growth after.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And I think it was Jackie that told me that kind of hard they go through is kind of their way of through that growth.
Yeah.
I always wonder which way, because I always see that. That's the only thing that gets me through sometimes, because I'm like, okay, I know there's going to be something good.
Yeah.
That's going to come
On the
down.
other side.
And it
Yeah.
always does. And I always wonder if it's like the card comes after the good, because it takes so much you know, for their brains, and it's so much effort for them that like they crash, or it's like the hard and then yeah, it's like
Have you guys heard of Wonder Weeks for babies? So like there's this whole like calendar thing, and I followed this when Jessie was a baby, when Amelie was a baby too, but not as much because I didn't have time to pay attention to that crap because I had 2 kids. But it's this principle that your kid, you go off their due date, not their birth date, and they're really fussy for a long time, and then after that fussy period, you'll see a leap in development, and they're fussy during that time because their body is developing for that leap. And I really think that's kind of how it is in autism, where it just takes so much out of them to go through a growth spurt or to take all this in, that you go through a really hard time. And then there's like this, they're coming out the other side, and they have learned, and there is this leap, but it's just, you had to go through kind of hell to get there. And I think all kids probably do it, but with our kids, you just, like everything, our kids are hungry, thirsty, you feel it. It's a lot more.
everything's so
Well,
much more
I
intensified.
don't know, Kimmy, I guess, I don't know, maybe her, maybe her receptive language was definitely more than, but it's hard to tell because,
Yeah, you don't know.
you know, Tabs, you talked about Nora takes you to the cupboard for the snack. I talked to receptionists at a Sunny Hill out of an evaluation because I was like, I know exactly what she needs. She takes me right to it. She takes me right to the milk. She just doesn't say, I want to drink milk. I mean, our children can definitely communicate without language. There's no question. But yeah, I guess you know, it's hard to tell what her, you know, what she really did understand, because
I know it is.
and I don't know about you guys, but I always have to give her that processing time, and I've had to work on that really hard.
Yes.
And it just,
Yep. And I still have to remind myself that constantly, because your nature is to like repeat yourself and say it a little louder so they can hear you better and it's clearer. But like once you do that, you're like
Muddying.
yeah, exactly. Okay, what about you, Jamie? How does communication look for your son?
It's a little similar to Nixon. Some of the stuff I think just because he's a boy, and I think boys can develop differently than girls. So in the beginning, I mean, I guess it's more like Nora, he did start developing some language. I remember his first ever word was our dog's name, Aldo. And he would say a few things, and he right off the bat could like identify, well, not right off the bat, not out of the womb, but pretty early on, before 1, he could like identify some numbers and letters, and he would look through his little books, and he would repeat like songs, like nursery rhymes, parts of at least, in like his cute little voice. But that didn't last very long, and around 15 to 18 months, I noticed that he got really quiet. And I remember my nephews and my niece come out usually every summer, and there was just a lot of kids at the time. And so I was like, maybe he's just quiet because there's so many other kids and they're talking for him. They're all older than him. That was like the first thing I brought up to the doctor. I was like, he's not talking as much anymore. He never developed like communicative language. That kind of all went away for a little while. And then some of it came back, mostly like the numbers and letters and stuff like that. And I was trying to be a good mom and not have my kid watch TV. But when he did start watching some shows around 2-ish, I mean, I wasn't perfect. He did watch some TV before then, but around 2, I started letting him watch like shows like Word Party and things like that. And he would start repeating those things, and he would talk to the TV more, like echoing or scripting came a little on, because he wasn't saying like a full sentence or anything. They would say a word, like on the show Word Party, they're teaching kids words. So they'd be like ankle, and he might say ankle one time, but it wouldn't be retained. With sign language, we only did sign language around food. And that's just because before I knew that he was going to lose language or anything, it was just kind of a popular thing to teach your kids sign language. And I started with food because he was most interested in food. So he had like more down and all done and a couple of those things. And I actually started getting worried that the sign language was stopping him from speaking. So when you guys talked about that with AAC devices, that kind of was what my thought was. I was like, oh, well, he's not going to talk because he can communicate a different way. It made me nervous, but we mostly just kept around food. And that's all he would really latch onto was the all done and the more stuff, because he liked to eat, which we were fortunate with. And then as time went on, slowly he would start kind of like scripting more things, and he would every once in a while say a 2 or 3 word sentence around 4, 3 and a half, 4. And sometimes I didn't realize it was scripting, and then I would figure it out. I remember around 4 one time, he walked into our bedroom. I remember this moment like clear as day. And he came in and we're sitting on the bed and he goes, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." This at that time was like amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. You're always
Yeah.
this magical moment where it clicks. And I was so excited. I told his teachers about it. I was like, oh my gosh, he came in. He knew like who we were. He said hi to us. And I realized later that it's from Boss Baby. He was scripting Boss Baby, but that was a big step for us. He was appropriately scripting. So
Yeah.
he knew that we were his mom and dad, and he was incorporating that. So that's what it went from scripting to like appropriately scripting, where he would be like, time for snack when we were eating
Oh,
dinner.
yeah. We
And
have that
things like
too.
that.
Mhm.
And so that was a huge step for us. And the speech therapists were very excited about that. He only ever did speech through school just because I wouldn't say we got pushback on it, but when we went and got him evaluated and stuff, no one ever seemed that concerned about it. They were just like, we'll just get him to school and they'll provide those things. I didn't even realize till like partway through preschool where one of his school speech therapists was like, does he do outside therapy? And I was like, no, should he be? So things like that. I feel bad. Like I just didn't know I should be like pushing for or on. And then the communication thing, unlike a lot of the girls, he had no desire to communicate with us. So that was the hardest part for me. There was no dragging me to the fridge. Car rides would be either when he was baby, he would be really fussy and crying, or maybe we're leaving a place and there's a meltdown, or they would be dead silent. I remember just sitting in the kitchen and like showing him, I'm going to cry, but I would have like juice and milk, and I'd be like, do you want juice or do you want milk? And he would just stare at me because I'm trying to get him to just like communicate anything. Like one of the first things I talked about in my story time, one of the first things he ever would want or bring to us was the remote, because he wanted to watch a show. It was always what he was interested in his time. There was never time to communicate out of his preferred things. So that was really hard for me at first. And now I'm starting around 5.5. He has started talking to us more in complete full sentences, still usually about what he wants to talk about. At 6, I can ask him questions and he might give me a 1-word answer. I'll be like, how was school? He'll say good. I'll say, what did you do at school? Good. But if he wants to watch like a show he likes, he'll be like, hey, can I watch Word Party? Like he can talk when he wants to talk, and he's getting better and we're always working on things. But it was a long journey, but I know that we're very fortunate in the fact that he talks and that the language is coming and has come, and it's all come in those big leaps. And with all the wait lists and stuff, we'll put something down like, oh, doesn't yet speak in complete sentences. And then by the time we get off that wait list almost a year later, he is. And so they're always like, oh, he can talk. Yeah. Like, so we're always having those. It's just a lot. He's just way behind his peers. And it's a struggle for me because I don't always know what's going on. I don't know what's hurting him.
She had a cavity 2 years ago. And the dentist, she had to go to the private center. They had she had full sedation. So it's kind of a big deal because she was a kid. The dentist said, I don't know how she was even walking. He said that cavity was so deep, but she had no way to, she wouldn't say, she has no way to articulate that she's got a sore mouth or a tooth. I mean, things just come out in behaviors, and it's like, then it all clicks. Oh,
you're like, oh, this has been bothering her for 5.5 weeks. It started on a Tuesday.
Yeah, that's what that was. Then you feel so bad because
you do feel there's a lot of guilt around communication.
A lot of guilt. There's just a lot of guilt around parenting.
Yes.
And then double that with like special needs when you can't always communicate with them properly. It's
well, I carry tons of guilt about Nixon, and I learned this from watching other people, but because he wasn't talking to us, we weren't really talking to him in the way that I talk to Nora at this point, because I know so much more. I didn't know at the time, but I have so much guilt about that, because I think that like we were just quiet because he was quiet, I don't know.
And you don't know when it's supposed to be coming. Like people keep telling you like, oh, boys take longer or things like that. And you're like, okay. And I will say, I mean, I did talk to Jesse all the time because I could not stand the silence in the car all the time. Or I always say I'm that crazy mom that was at the Walmart talking to her baby, like, hey, this is because you're taught to do that stuff. And it still didn't come. And
I've even done it without any kids with me without realizing.
I mean, we were talking, but it wasn't like the way that I communicate with Nora.
Yeah.
Like now I can be like ball, cup. You know, like I know
And knowing
that you
to
have.
pause and things like the
Yes,
pause, I
yes.
definitely did not do.
Yeah, yeah,
I would just
neither.
keep going. I would just talk. I would ask a question. I would answer it myself. It was just
How about you, Rachel? How's the mermaid communication go on in your house?
Oh, you know, I've heard a lot of the words that we would identify with throughout the other answers. Celie had this major regression around 15 months, and I would have said that it was over around 2.5. Went from like full loss, no sounds. I, like James, thought that the sign language we taught her took her words. Oh my God. If you're listening, that's not how it's going.
Do it all, people. Try it all.
So then I thought that things were going great. As I said, I would have said around 2.5, but she has always been a different person outside our home as she is inside our home. And speech was the first really big clue to that. And it took me a long time to put that together. But when Celie was 4, right before we got formally diagnosed, we had that doctor appointment where it's like 4-year well check. And the gal said, concluded all this thing with, can we talk about how your daughter's severely neuroatypical? And I just didn't know, but we started right then and there, like the following day on Ritalin, because we were having such struggle with safety and leaving the house and all this stuff, and we couldn't communicate.
And I'm sorry, Rachel, how old did you say she was then?
Right then she was 4 when she started Ritalin. And I remember picking her up from school, like on the first day, it was a good day. Second day of Ritalin, they were like, you will never believe. I'm like, what? She spoke all day. And I'm like, oh, all day. And they're like, she doesn't talk. She's never spoken. And I'm like, I am Celie Flanagan's mother. Like, who the do you think you're talking to? Of course she speaks, like she doesn't shut up,
Yeah.
at that point at home. And they're like, no, she doesn't talk to her peers. She doesn't know their names. She doesn't care. She knew how to say teachers. Like she had a Miss Savannah, and I think she had like a way she'd say Savannah. She had lots of nonverbal communication, as you'd expect. They knew she liked blue paint. I can only imagine how they learned that. So I feel like now the sort of stuff we're dealing with is that, well, again, another thing I've learned is that I thought as I learned about regressions for the first time, that it was a total loss. And what I know now is that there's this big ebb and flow of all the things. And for Celie, speech is part of that. And I think for us, when she's in mania, like this big higher rev of her mental health, she's more articulate, she's more capable, she's capable longer through the day. When she's in her depression, she's more likely to be nonverbal earlier. She struggles. So it's really in flux for us. And I think part of that, in conjunction with the fact that she can appropriately script, she has a plethora of options. She has a lot of receptive language, and that helps her to choose the appropriate script and sort of fake it deeper. Celie uses scripting sort of similar to Echolalia, where she'll, in Echolalia, it's sort of like words and titles and stuff. It's smaller, it's more phrasey, where scripting can be a whole scene, like Kaya. We've talked about Kaya scripting Chicago Fire, or I've heard Jamieson Jess do a script of maybe a scene of something, like, it goes line for line for line for line for line. With my daughter right now, the biggest example I can give you is that she's scripting within hunger. And I think that she's trying to figure out how to appropriately articulate that feeling and when people say it and why people say it. But right now, every time she sees someone eat something on her channels, on her YouTube, on her this and that, and the Paw Patrol, anything, she then will go into this like request, demand of, a food request. And so it'll be scripting. So she'll use somebody else's language to appropriately ask for what she needs, even though they aren't her words. This is like not a la Celie, it's through Paw Patrol. I would say as a mom, like type of person. I fell back into management and educating people when Celie was little, like long before we were giving coaching statements. I was titling everything. I spoke all the time. And it was like, the world was our classroom. Like we'd be at Target and this is red. Do you want to feel it? And so I knew she had some sensory stuff. I knew she was thrilled to no end about certain textures, but like, I just didn't know who she totally was. But her receptive language was, you could tell because she would be able to accomplish several tasks when she was very little nug. Even when she couldn't speak, she would be able to go get the shoe, get the thing, pick up the water. And that's part of, I think, probably what kept us from being flagged earlier.
Like
was
3-step
that
directions, which is pretty advanced for,
right.
you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel very privileged because I've been able to / have had to be her primary caregiver. Like we don't fit in a daycare. I did not go super well at a home daycare when she left, showed up at my work. But I have the privilege of being super tuned in. And so for her, we use a lot of, for lots of the like Celie's own self, communicating. It's a lot of nonverbal. Like if she has a need, I already know because she's clenching her fist or she's breathing heavy or she's sitting forward or she's fidgeting in a certain way and she's got rhythm about her. I just wrote a post on Flandeville about how I feel like she's as easy to read and as anything once you know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Which there's the trick there.
Yeah. Yeah.
She still would rather only talk about her preference, her world. She does not know how to ask Billy how his day was after he asks how hers was. She gives very few about the outside. How about you, Kimmy?
So, of course, you guys all know that my daughter is nonverbal. She started off around 11 or 12 months with some words. She'd say bruh for brother, baba. She could say Barney. Just the typical kind of simple sounds that you would expect at a year. And the words never really grew from those 5 or 6 words that she had. And she had a lot of ear infections. So there was like a lot of that going on. So that was kind of going around the same time. So I was told by a nurse that they can lose up to 90% of their hearing when they have an ear infection. So to me, that just made sense. Like she probably wasn't hearing the sounds and that's why her speech wasn't developing. But on the other side of that, it seemed very confusing to figure out if she could understand or not. So we've talked a lot about receptive language during this episode. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is the ability to understand when language is spoken to you. So there are people that can't speak at all, but they understand everything that is said to them. And I was never clear if she was understanding what we said to her, because sometimes it seemed like she understood and other times it seemed like she didn't. And I mean, she was just over a year, so it's a little bit of a red flag. It's not hugely concerning. If you say, hey, come here so I can change your diaper and they run the other way. I mean, are they not understanding or do they not want their
Not want to? Yeah. Yeah.
And then she stopped responding to her name. So then we were concerned about that. We actually thought she was deaf. Then we circled back to like, okay, why isn't she saying any more words? And then in fact, those words that she was saying, we're not really hearing very often, but then she would like pop up with a word. During her hearing test, she pooped in her diaper and she goes, poo-poo, clear as day. And the lady wrote it down. She goes, oh, I heard that. She had never said that before. And I don't think she ever said it again. But it was just like a weird thing because you're like, it's like that thing where you're just questioning everything, And then as time went on, we, became more concerned. The receptive language was a lot more concerning to me than the actually not saying words because it just, I just couldn't figure out if she could understand or not. Like it was very inconsistent and sensory and like all these other things come into play with anybody who lives with anxiety. If you're anxious, if you're nervous, if you're stressed out, like you're not understanding things the same way anybody. So like, of course, it's the same for our kids. Of course, we go on, we get the autism diagnosis and she was a little over 2 then. She still had no language. She didn't really even have sounds. Now, I say that, but she wasn't quiet. She made lots of noises, shrieks and laughs. And I didn't know what they were at the time, but lots of vocal stems she had, but no real clear sounds. Once in a while, you would get like a buh sound. but then you wouldn't hear it again. So she did speech just under 2. She got speech at school. We did outside speech. It didn't make a difference. We introduced sign. She really wasn't too interested in sign. She did more, but she kind of just did it to get what she wanted. She wanted something, she'd go and she'd be like, hello, lady, I'm doing this stupid sign. Give me what I want.
Yeah.
She was kind of using it the way that typical kids use please. We did more all done and help with the 3 that we kind of started with. But I mean, she did them when she was pressured to do them, if it was really like you were making her do it to get something. But outside of that, she didn't do it.
Around just a preferred item, Kimmy?
Yeah,
or like
exactly.
what she wanted. Yeah.
Or if she had something and you knew, we worked on that, and she and then we introduced PECS, which is the picture exchange system. She did okay with that, but she did pretty well with that at school. And they start with like 2 choices and they move up to 3. And that's just like a picture. So again, though, at home, she did preferred items. So she really wanted something. She really wanted popcorn. She'd go up to the fridge and get the picture and hand it to me. Like Tabitha said earlier, Alyssa had already figured out how to communicate non-verbally. She pointed. She actually used to go and slap the outside of the refrigerator when she wanted something.
Nora does that too.
Yep. Get over here, lady.
Bang
figure
the
out what I
cabinets.
want. She would point up to cabinets. She would lead me around. And she was able to, like, sometimes I would say, do you want this or that? And she would point to what she wanted. Or kind of like make a sound if she didn't want it. So she kind of had already had these skills. So I think in her mind, she was like, why am I doing this? Like,
I
she
don't
did
need
it
the
at,
pictures. Yeah.
yeah, she did it at school. And she did pretty well with it. Like, she had
Watch
this
me
whole,
get some juice.
she had a very elaborate like binder with like categories and all the, all stuff. And they did it, but everything at school is so structured compared at home. And we had like I still have Velcro places like 20 years later. I'm like, oh, this is from when we did this. But she didn't really use it to constantly communicate. I would be like, oh, we're going to go here and then do this. And that definitely helped her. That definitely tampered down the frustration, because she was very frustrated because my daughter knows exactly what she wants. And if you're not figuring it out, she used to get very angry.
Our daughter's just born that way.
Yeah.
I feel like girls are born full strength.
Mine was.
Yeah, so she really knew what she wanted, but like we didn't know what she wanted. And then as time went on, it became clear the talking had to kind of go on the wayside, and we had to do the communication, because that's the thing. It's like you have to figure out a way to do the communication. And then the speaking, as time went on, it went lower and lower on the priority list because we put all this effort into it. We worked with all these therapists. It still wasn't happening. She still didn't have, she really didn't even have sounds. And they even told me that receptively that she would never be able to understand anything without a visual cue, like ever. But she did understand stuff. It was inconsistent. And some days I'd be like, nope, she doesn't understand. And then like the next day, it would be like the more familiar things were for her, the more she would understand. So if we were leaving and I said, go get your shoes, she would go get her shoes. So it's like and I used to test her all the time. Like I would make sure, because sometimes you give cues without realizing you're giving them.
Yeah.
But if I would say like, shut the door, nothing. But if I say shut the door and point to the door, she would know to shut the door. It's stuff like that, so that's what it means to give like a visual cue as opposed to like just saying it. And even to this day, it's very murky on how strong her receptive language is. It's definitely grown. It's definitely gotten better, but it's still pretty weak. But she's very smart and she's able to really figure stuff out.
She listens like crazy. I could say a person's name and she would holler.
And she knows,
she
like,
listens.
She figures things out by looking at your facial expression, watching your body language, looking at the environment to see what's going on. And she does this in a split second. So she's so good at it that people think she understands so much more than she actually does. It has grown over the years. It has grown. There's definitely things that she understands that she didn't understand in the past. It's still not her strongest thing. The more words you use, the more gets lost in translation for her. It has to be very simple concepts for her. And I'm not saying this to down her. This is just her reality. This is what our reality is. It doesn't do me any good to pretend that she understands things that she doesn't, because that doesn't help her. That just causes more frustration for her in the end. Like her school feels like she understands so much because they'll say, oh, do you like Taylor Swift? And she'll sign yes. She doesn't know who Taylor Swift is. if you put it on and say, do you like this? She would tell you yes or no. She understands that.
She might also dance.
She doesn't understand things that are really abstract. Like that's still very difficult for her. And then she kind of like just started saying the word no. It just kind of like she could shake her head and kind of go like make sounds, but it wasn't no. And then one day no just came out. And then that just became like her word. So she could say the word no since she's been like, I don't even remember. I want to say like 6. Completely clear no. When she don't want something. So I always joke and say she was gifted one word and that's the word she chose. She's like, I'll take that one. That one's going to come in handy for me. Then she kind of started doing, they call them, I believe it's annotations, which it's like she would have the speech pattern, like the rhythm of it. So you could almost hear like a phrase, but the sounds weren't there. Like the phonics wasn't there, but it would.
Are you saying,
like,
hey, how are you? And she'd be like, huh. But it was always consistent.
Yeah. And it would like, her voice would go high when it's supposed to go high and the syllables would break up. And
that's interesting because Nora kind of does that now.
Seeley did that too.
Yeah.
So if I would say I love you, she would like kind of say something back, but like there wouldn't be sounds there, but it would have the pattern. And sometimes you'd go, wow, it really sounded like I think she just said that. But then that would be it. And then she started word approximations. And at 16, she got a speech device and they used it at school. She wouldn't use it at home. She got a consistent theme going on with this girl.
Relatable.
So, it's very different at school though, because even though she's using it at school and I come to understand this more now. So they're like, she does great with it at school because you're sitting at circle time and you're asking her a question and you're modeling it and they're all doing it and they all kind of have to do it. And it's going along with the school day. It's very different at home. At home's just much more open-ended. And she would just go crazy. If we even took it out of her bag, she would go completely ballistic. She did not want to use it. And I think she really viewed it as work and she associated it with school. And she's like, lady, you already know what I want. I'm not doing this. And we did for the most part. But now that I really look back on it, she started word approximations, which would be like, she would say, "Bye" or "bye." So those things started in her teens. So she started with some sounds. They weren't always consistent. She started being able to say mama and dada. I don't necessarily think she was saying them for a specific person, but of course I'd say mama. I've been telling her to say mama since she'd been 1, probably before then. And sometimes she would say it and it would be unclear. And sometimes she would say it, it would be clear. So the sounds were starting to come, I mean, very slowly coming. And then I wonder now if like the speech device actually helped that along. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it happened after she was using the speech device at school. And like everybody has kind of touched upon, there are people that think that it will stop their kids from talking. It will not stop your kids from talking. If anything, because our kids are so strong visually, seeing that picture and hearing that word at the same time, it makes it click for them sometimes. Not always. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's
just like really, learning styles for all people. All people have a learning style. And I feel like
there's something with seeing it and hearing it at the same time that for people on the spectrum, especially that are predominantly nonverbal, for some reason, it just makes things sink in just that little bit more, as opposed to just saying it. At this point, like I said, she's 17, she's 18. I've accepted the fact that she's not going to speak. I'm pretty okay with it. The only thing that bothers me is the fact that if she's hurt or sick, she can't tell us. You know, and I hate that. I hate that for her because I want her to be able to tell us so we can fix it for her. Or if she's really distressed or really upset, she can't really let us know. So I hate that aspect of it. But other than that, you just become used to it. And then as she was leaving high school, going into adult services right before her 22nd birthday, she just like started randomly said a couple words, and then her sounds, like her word approximations, she pretty much will try to say anything. And then she has a lot of echolalia, which I mean, it's like the first stage of speech, but I'll take it.
Which is
I mean?
like, that's the most fascinating thing about when I started following your page, is that she gained language in her 20s. For anyone out there, you never know.
It's not 5, it's not 8, it's not 10, it's not whatever bananas number you put there.
It's like they tell you, you know, the older they are without gaining language, the less likely they are to get it. And then by the time they're like, you know, 7, 8, 10, if they don't have language, then it's not going to happen. It's kind of what they lead you to believe, even by 5 or 6, I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
people feel that
Yeah.
way. And no, she doesn't have typical language. I wouldn't say that she's not what you would consider to be talking. There's not a lot of back and forth conversation going. A lot of it's repeating, identifying things, but she can like identify so many things. She has a lot of phrases she can say. She repeats constantly. She has to be prompted for a lot of it. A lot of her language has to be prompted, which would be like if she wanted, say, a cookie, I'd say, okay, and she'd say, I want cookie, which is great. I mean, that's a sentence. I never thought my kid would say a word, not even a sound at one point. So a 3-word sentence, I mean, for me, I'm doing like a comma every time. Even
A
though,
functional sentence, no less.
yeah, even though she
Yeah.
has done it a lot, like, because we'll kind of prompt her to do it. She's had a few instances of unprompted language, very few, probably like 6 or 7 over the past like year and a half. So in my mind, I just have the hope because it's like she did it once. That means the skill is there. Like it's there, it's really interesting. It's just fascinating the way.
Talking about sweet videos, the freaking video of you guys in the
Yes.
restaurant where she says, I love you.
I
Oh
love
my
you.
gosh.
Yeah,
The
I
first
will
time.
cry
I
immediately.
know.
That
Me
is
too.
go
She
look on
did.
her page on Autism Adventures with Alyssa. That video will stab you in the freaking heart. It's so sweet.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty
yeah,
amazing.
so last summer we were at a restaurant, and I mean, I really think it was the restaurant, probably more than me, because we were, shut down for months, and she hadn't been to a restaurant, and we were at a hotel that had a restaurant open, and then she just said it, and she has apraxia, so a lot of her speech is, even though she has it, a lot of it's unclear, and then she just said it like on her own. She had never done that ever in her life, so we were like,
But all your reactions, because then your daughter,
Yes.
I mean, it was just,
yeah,
And then
Yeah,
you
we
guys
got
just
her.
happen to be recording. It's
yeah, it was
Magic.
Yeah, I mean, I still can't believe it sometimes. I almost forget that she didn't do it. It feels like she's always been doing it, but obviously that's not the case. But the progress for her is really slow, but her receptive language is also growing. Her awareness is growing. It's not just about her being able to produce the sounds. It's just all these other things are kind of coming along with it. But it goes back and forth. Like sometimes she goes through little like slides where like it's not as clear. She doesn't do it as much. And then other times she's, I'm talking to somebody and she's repeating every 3rd word. You know what I mean?
For
The
real,
speech-
that's true.
The speech therapist was talking to me and then she's saying, like, trying to say everything she said, like she was saying. So it's like, it's funny. I mean, that's been amazing. That's just something, I mean, we just kind of made peace with the fact that it wasn't going to happen.
Incredible.
And, even though I say that we can't really have conversations and we can't have them in the typical way, like I can ask her questions now. Like I do a lot of choices for her. She's able to answer them though, and that's something we never thought we would have. So
Well, that's like such a fascinating thing with our kids in general, because they can have language and then they cannot have language. Like it really depends on the situation, who's around, what input is going on, how dysregulated they are. All of that is so much tied to their communication. It's just mind blowing. It's like
It
their
really
brain
is.
can't process too many things at one time. It's an overload, which I think everyone feels at certain points. Like if you had a long day and you've run through the ringer and at the end of the day, you can't even listen to a sound or watch a TV show or talk to your spouse or anything.
Yeah.
I attune it to that in a matter of minutes. Like their bodies and brains go to that within 2 minutes instead of a whole day's worth of.
And for her,
Input.
it's like a lot to do with
Mhm.
confidence too.
Mhm.
So the more she does it, the more confident she gets.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
You
other
can
times,
see that in her relationship with us, because I see her peek around your shoulder. Like, is that those aunties that are going to yell at me and make me hug my mother? Like she wants to engage. She's like ready for it. Today, when we spoke and it was on the phone, you could tell both of our girls were pissed because you can't see the auntie.
Celia was like, "Can we FaceTime? Like this is not making sense to me."
Can't do this, auntie.
okay. When we were kids, this was just an idea.
Exactly.
People,
If only the
this was a ride at
Jetsons had
Disney
this.
World. It's about the future.
Yeah,
Back
exactly.
to the future.
Yep. So there's so many different types of communication. We got verbal and nonverbal, scripting, and AAC devices, there's just so many avenues to explore with our kids. I say leave no stone unturned. I mean,
I
I'm still
agree.
looking into things that, there's another thing called spelling to communicate, a little bit controversial, but I'm, looking at some point to try that. The worst
Yeah.
that could happen is that it doesn't work.
As
I
a
mean,
mom of
I'm
a
writing down
6-year-old.
Jen's book here. I'm like,
I know,
gotta
me
read
too.
that book.
I was like, I gotta read that book. I feel like with AAC devices, with PECS, no one talked to us about kind of touched on PECS with Nixon, and no one talked to us about a device with him. And he didn't really pick up PECS, but they didn't really press us to keep trying either with him. So we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And we just kind of were like, okay, I guess you guys are saying this isn't working for him, but you're not really teaching me how to do it either. So I guess we're just going to wait for the language to develop. But I say any tools you can give your kids for communication is just like so powerful to
And don't ever
them.
let anybody limit your child. I'll tell you what
Yeah.
your child can or can't do, because you just don't know.
Right.
Kai didn't talk until she was 5.
Yeah.
Well,
You know?
actually, PECS reminds me, I came home one day from work and her therapist had been there, obviously, and there was PECS all over the house. I mean, on the stove, on the microwave, on the faucet, the mirror, the back of the toilet. I mean, they were everywhere through the house. Yeah, I remember. That was just so bizarre.
It's interesting what our kids like in terms of communication or assistance, or I mean, assistance with communication or anything, medicine, like any therapeutics, like so much for at least Sealy is based off of the chemistry with the person who is presenting.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
And not just that, but like any therapy, the wrong speech therapist, get out of my life. The right one, can you move in? The wrong sales worker, get effed. You're going to make her run away. The right one, can you move in? Like, I feel like if a speech device wasn't available to Sealy earlier because she could speak, even if like it was not being understood that it was scripting or whatever. Now, 2 years later, the world gets an AAC device in October for $10. Like, things change so rapidly that I feel like I, as a mom, as a care provider for my daughter, not just a mom, I remember to circle back. Like I try and remember to circle back, because titling is how we got through Target. If I kept her mind busy and her hands full, I could get her through a social setting. Well, then later on, when we know that all these other things are in play with her diagnosis and she's nonverbal, guess what I'm doing? I am titling and I'm keeping it quiet and I'm keeping it like subtle and I'm keeping it simple and I'm slowing the shit down. Like you're still doing all the same things and it works different every time you go at
different times. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention that I just kind of forgot about was, so when Alyssa moved from her school program into adult services, she would not use her speech device at day program. And because of her being an adult and there's not like a speech therapist there the way there is at school, they kind of were just like, well, she doesn't want to use it. So that was just like a wrap. So then I was in a panic because she's used it for now 7 years and she's does really well with it at school. So I had found a speech therapist that took adults, which wasn't easy, and they were going to work on her speech device with her. So at the same time that we were doing this is also the same time that her speech started to develop. Now she's always had the speech device at school, so I'm not saying it's 100% that, but I do think it did play a factor. So what I started doing is I started using the speech device with her at home, doing structured activities. Like we'll do flashcards, we would do games, and she really likes to do it. So she won't initiate it and use it on her own yet, but I really think that this has also helped pick up her speech. I think it's the speech device. I think she probably was having some kind of growth spurt probably in her brain, probably like that kind of last one you have in your 20s. I think it was all these kind of moving parts were working together at the right time, but I really think the speech device played a big part in that, because I think the seeing and hearing and seeing and hearing, even though we weren't really doing it at 100%, I think that really also like facilitated the language for her.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing like how complicated communication is? Like, look, like we're all so different. Even when my son was first diagnosed, I thought there was speaking and non-speaking. Like I did
two camps.
Yeah, my son speaks, but that's not always communication. Sometimes I don't know. We're just living in Peppa Pig world. Like it is so much more intense than you can ever imagine.
And there's so much to it, to retrieving the word, recalling it, and then the motor planning that it takes, because it goes from your brain to, you know, through your mouth and your muscles, and all these things play a role in it, and we think nothing of it. It's like so many steps to that process.
Tongue is the
every
most
time you
used
say a
muscle
word
in your body.
That's true.
One of the people at Mayo said that to us about Sealy. Like if I had said something to the effect of, in this mixed topic conversation, I said something like, well, it's as though her arms and legs are like cat's tails. Like they seem to just work independently from her whole situation. And then later I was talking about her speech and how sometimes it gets like mumbly before it goes, because Sealy often loses language late in the day. And they're like, well, isn't that the same as the arms? Like exhaustion, fatigue, like all of it. She just can't keep up.
One thing I wanted to throw out there for people, another resource for this AAC Awareness Month, is you can get a trial device. There's a couple places you can get one. Talk to Me Technologies will let you borrow one, I think, for 2 weeks to a month.
We went through Easter seals.
Easter seals, and in our state, one of our universities, NAU, will mail you a device with the programs on it so you can trial it with your kids. A lot of universities and states do that. So you can get a trial device to try it with your kid for free. And also insurance companies sometimes will let you trial a device for 30 days as well, as you're getting your prescription or your recommendation from your speech language pathologist to get an actual device.
Like we mentioned earlier, October is AAC Awareness Month. They do have, I know the product we use is called Prolo To Go. It's very popular. It's about $250, I believe now, but that's 50% off the whole month of October. So if you're thinking about doing, and there's a lot of other ones that are also 50% off. So if you're thinking about doing it, October, it would be a great time to do it if you're just going to do it on your own. But
if you're in Canada, it's a cool price of $400 even.
That exchange rate in Canada.
Yes.
Well, also 50% off.
I have one more quickie. I'm wondering in terms of communication, if Tabitha and Jamie have any book ideas for how to better communicate with the community at large or a teacher specifically. Do you guys know of any tools?
Our friend Jamie Ramos should talk about her recently published book.
We've got Vanna White.
I am a published
British
author.
Columbia International.
No, so I do this thing with my son's teacher because my son does not communicate with me. I do not know what's happening at school. So I was advised by a friend who's a special educator to start a back and forth book. So I've been doing that through all my son's times at school. It helps so much. So I have published a back and forth book that you can use yourself that has like a page for you to communicate what happened at home that morning or the night before, and then the teacher can communicate back to you. It makes it a lot easier to fill out than just a blank page. It's like circle what mood they were in. Did they eat lunch? When was the last time they go to the bathroom? So it's on Amazon right now.
Vanna White up there.
There's 2 different covers, but it's the same inside. We'll link them in the description. And then Tabitha has some books.
I have 2 books. Yes. Do You Talk the Way I Talk, which is a children's book to kind of show different forms of communication. We have 4 characters, one that uses PECS, one that uses an AAC, little girl character that does some scripting, and then one character with a language delay. And then our second book is Me and My AAC, which is our character Ben, who strictly uses an AAC device. And so the whole story is told through his AAC. Also, Jen's Vanna Whiting them for us too. Also available on Amazon. So
internationally.
Yes. And we will have a 3rd book coming out in October.
Yoo-hoo!
Exciting.
Oh, it's very exciting. It's called What's the Commotion with My Emotion? It's going to be about self-regulation and talking about big feelings. So
is that a scripter?
That's our scripter, Inez. She's going to be talking about her feelings, and we're very excited for the 3rd one.
We'll take 39 copies.
So check that out. We'll link
check it
all the
out.
books in the description.
So this is our episode. This is how we communicate. As you can hear, we have all different little bit of everything in this group here that we have. We want to advise you to, don't ever let anyone limit your child. Try everything that you can. Don't be afraid. Things are only going to help your child along. Nothing is going to stop them from doing it. So
And celebrate every word, but no after a while. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us.
you.
Good night,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you for joining us at the table for the 3rd episode of our 6th series, This Is How We Do It. If you are enjoying the podcast and happen to be listening on Apple Podcast, we would appreciate if you could rate and review us. You can also leave a review on our Facebook page. Make sure you're following us on Facebook and Instagram. If you need to contact us, you can email us at table45podcast@gmail.com. We have new episodes every Monday. Join us next week for our special storytime episode for this series. We can't wait to sit with you again, and we'll see you soon. Bye.